Today, we're diving into a legend that has captivated us for centuries, the Great Library of Alexandria. The question that haunts us is, what did we actually lose when this incredible collection of knowledge just disappeared?
You've probably heard the story, right? This romantic idea of a single massive fire wiping out all the wisdom of the ancient world. It's an incredible story, but how much of it is actually true?
Okay, so first, let's just try to wrap our heads around the scale of this place. The Library of Alexandria wasn't just, a building with some scrolls. It was a dream, an absolutely massive ambition to gather everything humans had ever learned, all under one roof.
It was founded way back in the 3rd century BCE by the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. And it wasn't just a library. It was part of a bigger research center called the Mausoleum. Think of it like a home of the muses. And their goal? Well, it sounds simple, but it was just impossibly huge. Get a copy of every single scroll in the known world.
And let me tell you, they were not messing around. At its peak, estimates say it held something like 700,000 papyrus scrolls. And get this for an acquisitions policy. The kings ordered that any ship that docked in the harbor had to be searched. If they found any books, they'd be seized, taken to the library to be copied, and then they'd give the copy back, not the original. Can you imagine?
So what was actually on all these scrolls? Well, pretty much everything you can think of. You have the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle, Euclid's geometry, the physics of Archimedes, the whole shebang. But it wasn't just science. It was also poetry from Sappho and the complete plays of guys like Aeschylus and Sophocles, who, by the way, wrote over 200 plays combined. It was literally a snapshot of the entire mind of the ancient world.
And you have to understand, this wasn't some dusty warehouse. No way. This was a buzzing, vibrant hub of research. I mean, Eratosthenes figured out the circumference of the entire planet with shocking accuracy while working there. Callimachus basically invented the library catalog. See, this was a place where knowledge wasn't just being stored, it was actively being made.
All right, so if this place was so incredible, how did it all just vanish? The story we all know points to one big dramatic fire. But the real story, well, it's a lot more complicated. And honestly, it might be even more tragic.
Yeah, there wasn't just one single event. It was more like a death by 1,000 cuts, spread out over hundreds of years. It really started with political drama, with purges that forced scholars to flee. Then, sure, there was a fire in 48 BCE when Julius Caesar was in town, but that was a warehouse on the docks full of scrolls, not the main library itself. A big deal for sure, but not the whole story. Later on, you had more conflict, religious decrees that led to the destruction of a daughter library. So the library didn't really burn down in one go. It just faded away.
So that brings us to the real heart of the matter. If it was a slow decline, not a single explosion of flame, then what did we actually lose forever? And maybe more importantly, what survived?
And make no mistake, the losses are genuinely heartbreaking. We've lost something like 90% of the poetry of Sappho. We have just a tiny fraction of the plays from the great Greek tragedians. We're missing cornerstone works from the father of astronomy, Hipparchus, and crucial medical texts. The cultural loss, it was huge. It was absolutely real.
I mean, that's a devastating list of everything that's just gone. But here's the key question. Was every single one of those scrolls a one-of-a-kind original that blinked out of existence forever? Well, the answer is not quite.
And this is where we get to the saving grace of the ancient world. Copying. Just constantly copying things. Let's take Aristarchus of Samos. This is the guy who came up with a sun-centered model of the universe, 2,000 years before Copernicus. The myth says his genius idea was lost in the fire. But the reality? His work survived. Why? Because other scholars copied it, and that's how it got passed down.
And here's the proof right here. This is a page from a medieval manuscript, a copy of his work. See, knowledge back then wasn't all stuck in one place. It survived because it was spread out. The really important stuff got copied over and over and sent to other libraries, to other scholars all over the known world.
Okay, so if the library wasn't destroyed in one big fire, and if the really important ideas survived because they were copied, then what is the real tragedy of Alexandria? What are we missing here?
It turns out the real tragedy wasn't a villain with a torch. It wasn't one single fire. It was something way more ordinary and, in a way, much scarier. It was the simple fact that the stuff they wrote on was fragile. Remember, this is way before the printing press. Everything was written on papyrus, which is basically a type of paper made from reeds, and it could just decay, especially in humid weather. A scroll might only be good for 100 years or so before it had to be copied again, by hand, word for word. And what that means is that simply neglecting a text was as bad as burning it. If nobody thought a scroll was important enough to copy, it would literally just turn to dust. The loss of knowledge wasn't an event. It was a slow, quiet process.
And that ancient problem brings up a really modern question, doesn't it? I mean, we've swapped out fragile papyrus for digital bits and hard drives. But are we really any safer? Think about it. Hard drives fail. File formats become obsolete. And what about all the data we store on servers owned by companies that could disappear tomorrow? Just how permanent is our universal library?
So in the end, the mystery of the Library of Alexandria isn't really about what was destroyed. It's about how easily knowledge itself can just disappear. It reminds us that knowledge isn't some permanent stone monument. It's more like a delicate garden that needs constant tending to survive. And the real question the library leaves for us is, are we taking